You are not here by accident. Out of all the voices in the world, this message found you because you were meant to hear it. You are not ordinary. You are not weak. You are a force, a light, a divine survivor, walking proof that no amount of darkness can snuff out a soul chosen by purpose. The pain you've been through wasn't just suffering, it was preparation. The betrayal, the injustice, the silent nights you cried out with no answer, it was all recorded. And now, the universe is responding. You are stepping into a moment where the tables turn. The reckoning begins, not in anger, but in balance. Not for revenge, but for restoration. This isn't just about what they did. This is about who you've become. Unshaken, unbroken, unstoppable. And now, the world is about to see the power of someone who made it through hell and came out holding heaven. You're not just a survivor. You're the storm they never saw coming. Some reach the threshold too late, dragging behind them the weight of choices made in arrogance and cruelty. Now they find themselves speaking into a silence that no longer replies, not because no one is listening, but because the time to speak rightly has long passed. What pours from their mouths isn't redemption. It's panic, wearing the mask of piety. This isn't surrender, it's bargaining. They're not seeking to right their wrongs, they're scrambling to outrun their sentence. The clock has turned, and the ledger of justice is no longer taking negotiations. They once treated mercy like a loophole, used apologies as performance, and now, with the edge of consequence before them, they still cling to the delusion that divine law can be leveraged like human systems. The pleas are pitiful not for their volume, but for their emptiness. They cry out not because they've been awakened, but because they've been cornered. Regret, in their case, isn't a mirror. It's camouflage. These cries for deliverance aren't rooted in awakening. They're steeped in avoidance. The soul that once delighted in destruction now begs not for healing, but for immunity. Their words collapse under the weight of their hypocrisy. They call on the name they once mocked, not in reverence, but in desperation. These aren't prayers. They're last-minute escape plans crafted by hearts that still believe consequence is something negotiable. But justice doesn't flinch at volume. It doesn't pause for theatrics. What they built through their actions stands like an unmovable monument before them. Every act of harm etched into eternity, every choice made in selfishness and cruelty has rippled into reality. And now, the tide has returned. You are not here by accident. If you feel the pull, the knowing deep inside that you are chosen, this is your moment. Click the super thank you button and give $20 or more to unlock deeper insights, exclusive content, and a path that aligns with your divine purpose. This isn't just a contribution, it's a declaration, a step toward who you were meant to be. Answer the call, walk with us, and step fully into your destiny. Your journey begins now. They called for silence when others wept. Now silence meets them. They showed no mercy to the vulnerable. Now they taste what they sowed. There's no plea loud enough to erase what was done with intent. No trembling voice can undo what they forged in deliberate harm. The scales haven't forgotten, and the balance is being restored. The consequence isn't cruel, it's exact. What's returning to them isn't vengeance, it's balance. And when it arrives, it will come not with rage, but with certainty. The same certainty that governed every moment they dismissed the humanity of others. Now they are left to face what they never believed would come. A response not of anger, but of unwavering divine order. A stillness so final, it can only be called justice. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Galatians 6:7. Think of it like this. If you plant poison in the ground, don't be surprised when bitter fruit grows. Some people spent years tossing seeds of harm like it was harmless, thinking the dirt would forget. But the harvest always comes. And now it's standing at their front door. They lived like spiritual law was some suggestion, like they could bulldoze through life and never have to face what they buried behind them. They acted like mercy had no limit and like divine order could be bargained with when the bill finally showed up. But now that bill is due. What they thought was covered, what they laughed off, what they called not that serious, it's back. And this time, it's not knocking. It's kicking down the door. See, there's a moment in every person's journey where grace pulls up a chair and waits. It doesn't yell. It doesn't demand. It simply invites. And God, in His mercy, will give that invitation over and over again. A mentor, a message, a moment, a dream that shook them awake. A friend who said, "That's not who you were meant to be." But instead of listening, they scoffed. Instead of turning, they pushed harder. Instead of bowing their head, they puffed out their chest. They thought spiritual warning was for the weak. They thought consequence was for the less clever. They treated your heart like a testing ground, like your kindness was a resource they could drain dry and walk away from without a second thought. But God saw it. He saw how they used your goodness, how they poisoned your peace, how they turned your trust into a playground for their ego. And while they were running around pretending they were untouchable, heaven was taking notes. Not in anger, not in haste, but with precision, with patience, with perfect timing. Now, the days they thought would never come are here. And all that bravado, it's gone. All that ego melted in the presence of truth. What they called winning was just a delay. What they thought was getting away with it was just God holding back so they could change. But they didn't. The warning signs were everywhere. In their sleep, in their relationships, in the way peace slowly disappeared from their lives. But they said, "I'm fine." They said, "I've got this." They rolled their eyes at wisdom and ran straight into the wall they swore didn't exist. This isn't some random storm. This is the downpour from clouds they built themselves. And now, the chosen ones, those of you who stayed faithful, who didn't retaliate, who kept praying even when it felt like your prayers hit the ceiling, now you get to watch the balance return. Not because you wanted revenge, but because heaven believes in justice, because God keeps the books, and when He moves, He doesn't miss. So don't feel bad when their cries get louder. Don't second-guess the peace that starts flooding your spirit, because this isn't your doing. It's divine timing finally unfolding. The pain you endured wasn't ignored. The betrayal you carried wasn't invisible. The sleepless nights, the tears, they've been converted into evidence in heaven's court, and the verdict is now being delivered. Beloved, you weren't just a bystander. You were the sacred. You were the assignment they failed. And now the weight they threw on you is falling back on them, not out of cruelty, but out of holy justice. You're still standing, still rising, still covered, still chosen. And while they're begging for time, you're stepping into yours. They were not without signs. Visions flickered through their nights. Messages arrived through strangers with eyes that saw more than they should have. Moments came that cracked their illusion, but they sealed it tighter every time. Their downfall wasn't sudden. It was slow, deliberate erosion caused by pride parading as strength. They thought they were too clever for consequence, too superior for submission, too advanced for the simplicity of accountability. Each refusal to change stiffened something inside them. The longer they delayed, the heavier their own resistance became. And now they are trapped inside a version of themselves that cannot bend, cannot break, and therefore cannot be rebuilt. What could have been a softening has hardened into finality. They had lifelines disguised as inconvenience. They had holy disruptions they mistook for chaos. They had second chances presented as ordinary moments. But they demanded miracles while scorning mercy. Every detour away from healing, every road they took that led further into their illusion was chosen. No force dragged them, no darkness tricked them. They preferred their lies to the discomfort of change. Now they whisper apologies with trembling breath, not out of understanding, but desperation. And desperation, this late, is not repentance, it is evidence. Evidence that they knew better, but wanted shortcuts. Evidence that they gambled with soul-level truths and hoped for a loophole. But truth does not offer back doors. It opens once and closes when dismissed. What they're facing isn't punishment, it's arrival. This is what happens when you outrun every opportunity until opportunity no longer knocks. This isn't divine cruelty, it's the silence that follows a million ignored chances. Those who once tried to pull them back have moved on, free of guilt, because they did their part. What comes now is simply the culmination of everything they chose not to become. Some souls walk into the world carved from a different blueprint. They see through illusions that others mistake for truth. They feel the tremble in the ground long before the quake. Their silence isn't absence, it's discipline. Their distance isn't detachment, it's protection. While others chase approval, they carry purpose. While crowds chase comfort, they carry calling. They are the unseen architects of balance, standing where others would crumble. They're not loud, but they are loud in spirit. Dear brothers and sisters, may the peace of God fill your hearts today. I come to remind you of a profound truth. Our lives are firmly established in God's divine purpose, untouched by the fleeting worries of this world. As Scripture tells us, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. Luke 6:38. Like the mighty oak whose roots are planted deep in rich soil, our foundation is anchored in God's eternal truth. Every move we make, every stand we take, is upheld by His enduring strength. Today, you have the opportunity to participate in this divine blessing. By clicking the Super Thank You button and offering a gift of $50, you will sow into a harvest that will return to you many times over in God's abundant grace. While most follow the lanes paved for them, they move along roads no one else dared mark. And though they often walk alone, their steps send ripples across realms. Their strength is subtle, their wisdom ancient, and their presence unmistakable to those attuned to truth. You won't find them in the spotlight, but their impact radiates far beyond it. These are the ones who carry knowing in their bones, who move with reverence and fire. If you've always felt like the outlier, like your eyes see further and your spirit sits deeper, that's not coincidence, it's design. You were crafted for more. There's a place for such spirits, a gathering of those who don't just awaken, but activate, those who aren't here to fit in, but to shift the world's frequency. If you know that speaks to you, you already know where to go. The invitation isn't loud, because those who are meant to hear it already have. And whether you walk with us now or meet us later, know this: the world changes because of people like you, because you chose to be different, because you stayed true. And for that, We honor you. They didn't stumble into your life and accidentally hurt you. They arrived with blueprints and broke things on purpose. This wasn't clumsiness, it was destruction, wearing a mask of charm. What happened wasn't a misstep, it was sabotage executed with spiritual precision. They scoped out the soft places within you, marked your vulnerability like coordinates, and fired with intent. It wasn't just betrayal, it was desecration. They walked into what was sacred and left ashes behind. This wasn't just emotional damage, it was a breach of soul contract. There are some acts that cross deeper lines, lines etched in spiritual law, not human law. They violated the space where innocence lived, not out of ignorance, but out of strategy. They studied your light, then launched their darkness at its core. The pain wasn't just in what they did, it was in knowing they knew exactly what it would do to you. Their cruelty wasn't heat of the moment. It was cold, calculated. It wasn't a mistake, it was a mission. They believed your spirit was theirs to mold, to ruin, to break into silence. But what they never understood is that desecrating a sacred space comes with cosmic consequence. Every tear they pulled from you was recorded. Every time they turned your trust into a weapon, the scales tipped further against them. And now, the reckoning they never believed in has begun, not because you asked for vengeance, but because balance demanded it, because the very laws they mocked are now weighing every one of their choices. What they mistook for silence was just timing. What they thought was immunity was grace, giving them space to change. They didn't, and now that space has closed. Their cruelty wrote its own prophecy. Let them tremble now in their begging. Let them try to rewrite the record with desperation. But the energy they set in motion can no longer be reversed. It has already gathered momentum, and it's coming back, not as punishment, but as echo, not as revenge, but as response. That's what they never understood. Eternal law doesn't flinch, it fulfills. Some people reach the end of their rope not because the thread snapped, but because they spent their lives unraveling it, strand by strand. And when they finally scream into the heavens for relief, the silence that returns isn't cruel, it's correct. What they're begging for isn't restoration, it's exemption. They don't want to be made new, they want to be excused. But creation doesn't work that way. The same force that builds stars and cradles galaxies cannot be swayed by panic masquerading as prayer. Real justice has no panic button. Real love doesn't sacrifice the innocent to soothe the guilty. If the universe bent now to their cries, it would betray the very foundation it's built upon. What they call silence is actually loyalty to the wounded, the betrayed, the broken, to those who were never offered mercy when it mattered most. They call it divine abandonment, but it's really sacred restraint, because what they want is not justice, it's reversal. They want their choices erased without ever holding them. They want the scoreboard cleared without acknowledging they ever played. But divine law doesn't lose its memory. It remembers you every time you are crushed beneath the weight of their choices. It remembers what they dismissed as no big deal. It remembers what you were forced to carry in silence. And now, as they rattle the gates of heaven with rehearsed apologies, the response is absence. Not because God has turned away, but because justice has already arrived. It doesn't need to speak, it just is. They are not being ignored. They are simply no longer being entertained. The absence of an answer is the clearest answer of all. By the time some reach their final breath, they haven't just made mistakes, they've become their mistakes. What once could have been softened through humility is now rigid beyond rescue. Change demands surrender, and surrender requires the ability to admit you were wrong at the roots, not just in the results. But when someone spends a lifetime polishing their pride into armor, nothing soft can reach them anymore. This isn't about fear. Even the worst of us can be afraid. Fear doesn't equal repentance. It's easy to be afraid when the lights go out. It's harder to be honest before they ever flicker. They convince themselves that accountability was a game only fools played, that consequences were only for those without leverage, and in doing so, they hardened into something transformation can no longer touch. The decay didn't happen all at once. It crept in with every time they excused cruelty, justified manipulation, or dismissed empathy as weakness. Eventually, they rewired themselves to see power as virtue and harm as strategy. Their conscience dimmed, not from neglect, but from overuse in the wrong direction. When that kind of soul stands at the edge, it's not death that terrifies them. It's recognition. Because in that final mirror, there's no one left to lie to. The reflection staring back isn't someone who made a few bad calls. It's someone who spent decades walking away from grace with eyes wide open. Asking that spirit to turn now is like asking stone to bleed. And that is the price of never listening when you could still be changed. Some people spend so long reinforcing the same distorted identity that real growth would feel like annihilation. Change would require them to dissolve everything they've clung to, not just behavior, but belief. And that's the one thing they'll never surrender. They're no longer being held back by punishment or divine exile. They're confined by the very architecture of their own decisions. They are sealed inside the cage they welded together, one decision at a time. Evolution in its highest form requires continual unraveling, a willingness to step away from certainty, from ego, from illusion. But at each intersection, when the moment arrived to let go of an outdated piece of self, they clung tighter. They mistook the invitation to rise as a threat to their control. And so, instead of ascending, they chose to entrench. Instead of expansion, they chose decay. When people refuse to evolve, they don't pause, they regress. They contract around their wounds, coil around their control, fossilize around their fears. What could have been an upgrade became a shutdown. And by the time the consequences arrived, the doorway to real change had already collapsed behind them. Their mind didn't just reject wisdom, it repelled it. Their spirit didn't just stall, it sank. They crafted a reality where no light could enter without being twisted into shadow. And now, the person they'd have to become, to be healed, is someone they no longer know how to become. The raw materials for transformation are gone. All that's left is echo and shell. The laws that govern spiritual movement are precise. Miss enough moments of reckoning, and inertia takes over. Cross enough lines without remorse, and even time stops offering exit routes. At some point, free will stops looking like freedom and starts functioning as a sentence. Every act has resonance. Each decision is a ripple, and when someone unleashes harm into the world with intent, it doesn't disappear, it travels. The waves don't vanish just because the one who cast the stone forgets the motion. Those ripples find their way back. The energy they poured into harming others didn't vanish into the void. It circulated, multiplied, matured. They sent out waves of destruction. And now those same waves return to shore. Not out of vengeance, but because that's what was set in motion. They weren't punished. They were mirrored. This isn't about wrath. It's not even about discipline. It's about universal law balancing the equations. When distortion is emitted into the fabric of existence, it bends reality around it. That bend doesn't stay in one place forever. It completes its curve and returns to the source. Every anxious night they gave you is now their sleepless reckoning. Every time they dismantled your dignity has become the erosion of their own peace. The silent storms you weathered are now thundering overhead in their world. They're not being targeted. They're simply standing beneath the sky they once soaked in fire. The current collapse they face isn't arbitrary. It's a reflection. The cosmos doesn't take sides. It simply returns what was sent. They're not the victims of cruelty now. They're feeling the echo of the cruelty they once considered strategy. The internal chaos they feel now is their past catching up, not to punish them, but to answer them. Now is the moment to share God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. With a donation of $100 or more, you can actively participate in His divine mission and contribute to His greater plan. Every offering you make reflects the boundless generosity of God, and I trust it will return to you abundantly, far exceeding your hopes. Always remember, His protection and blessing accompany your every step and every act of giving. You are a vital part of His sacred design. You are strong and radiant, steadfast like His mighty rock. Experience God's miracles, feel the rewards of your generosity deep within your soul, and shine your light with boldness and faith. May you be richly blessed, and may the light of the Lord continually guide your journey, and it always answers, not with noise, but with precision, not with wrath, but with weight. There comes a moment when the echoes of their own cruelty return, not as distant whispers, but as precise reflections. Every tremor they feel now is tied directly to the tremors they forced through your soul. Every surge of dread mirroring what once rippled through your chest. This isn't retribution. This is resonance. What they failed to understand was that their actions weren't lost to time. They were imprinted, encoded into the unseen layers of reality. The harm they caused wasn't a passing event. It became a permanent entry in a vast, incorruptible archive. The cosmos kept meticulous account, not out of vengeance, but out of equilibrium. Your suffering didn't vanish into silence. It was recorded with infinite accuracy. And now, those pages are being read back aloud, to them. Each cold glance, each cruel word, each violation of your dignity has circled back to the source. And not one moment has gone unrecognized. What they assumed was insignificant, the universe treated as sacred. They underestimated the weight of your soul, not realizing that their every offense would trigger ripples across divine circuitry calibrated to respond, not in rage, but in exactitude. This isn't about them anymore. It's about you. The depth of your endurance became the measure by which their collapse would be delivered. The pain you carried became the scale. They tried to treat your spirit as disposable. The cosmos made it central. Now the threshold has been crossed. There is no rewinding, no bargaining, no rewrites. What's unfolding isn't a punishment, it's a correction. This is the universe recentering itself. This is the divine algorithm, completing the equation they kept trying to escape. The silence meeting their cries isn't absence, it's finality. Their downfall is not a spectacle for your satisfaction. It's the inevitable conclusion of a narrative they wrote themselves. This moment has nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with resolution. The balance has tipped, and with it comes a confirmation. Your experience mattered. Your anguish was not invisible. The betrayal, the pain, the isolation, it all resonated beyond the physical and called upon forces older than time to respond. Now those forces are speaking, and their answer isn't wrath, it's clarity. The moment their time ends becomes the moment your freedom begins, not because of their loss, but but because of your survival. They reached for destruction. You reached for life. And that made all the difference. You walk forward now, not just as someone who endured, but as someone who witnessed the sacred mechanics of justice unfold in real time. You didn't just survive, you were vindicated. You've become proof that integrity doesn't vanish in darkness, that truth doesn't die under cruelty, and that divine order never loses track of the smallest, most silent cry. You've crossed through the valley, not with vengeance in your heart, but with peace in your chest. The kind of peace that only comes from knowing the universe does, in fact, keep its promises. The story is complete, and you're still standing.